Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new season of the Wingfeather Saga on Angel Studios. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So the Igby family is back for another adventure in Angel Studios' really charming fantasy series, the Wingfeather Saga, which is based on the very best-selling books by author Andrew Peterson. And if you saw my review for the first season on this channel, you will know that I really enjoyed it. I dug a lot of what was going in for that first season. And to me, the second season does build on the momentum of that very promising first season with a thrilling new story that is bigger and better in almost every way. I think offering a very wholesome adventure that the whole family can enjoy. And for the uninitiated out there, the Wingfeather Saga is the sort of story you might get if you kind of took The Lord of the Rings and The Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, you put them all into a blender and it would spit out the Wingfeather Saga series, which is not to say that the show is derivative, at least no more than like all fantasy is, kind of written in the shadow of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Rather, I think the story takes inspiration from the best characteristics of those tales and then fashions it into something that almost paradoxically kind of feels both like comfortingly familiar and captivatingly original. It offers the epic world of Tolkien and the kind of rich theological underpinnings of Lewis and the very whimsical storytelling sensibilities of J.K. Rowling, which is all to say that it's some pretty good stuff. And like I said, I enjoyed a ton about the debut season. In fact, it enticed me enough to go, purchase the 4-book series on Amazon and read through the whole series, which I will say is definitely well worth the time. But I think even so, the first season did take a bit of time to find its footing and kind of to build any sort of momentum, which is not unusual for these types of stories. I think it's kind of fantasy show counterpart. The Rings of Power experienced some of the same kind of initial growing pains in its first season before I think finding more traction in its second season. And the more relaxed pacing of season 1 is also, I think, a byproduct just of the source material itself, which doesn't really ramp up in the action until the climax. But the new second season of the show does build on the momentum of last season's very exciting, I think, kind of concluding last couple of episodes. And it may be a very tired, overused cliche that, all sequels must be bigger and better. But the Wingfeather Saga does follow that formula because the sense of stakes and just danger have definitely increased this time. I think with the Igby family now on the run from the lizard-like fangs, there's just a lot more action and things going on, as well as just opportunities to explore the world outside of Gripwood, which was the small kind of peaceful town that did serve as the setting for almost all of season 1. The season is also just a little bit darker, at least relatively speaking. Thankfully it doesn't totally follow the grim dark trend of just darkness for darkness sake. But I think whereas the villains in the first season came across a bit more naughty rather than evil, the tone in the second season is a bit more serious this time. There are real threats and real consequences and even an emotional character death. Although, to be clear, there's still nothing going on that I think would be intense for younger viewers. My own 9-year-old sons, they had no problems with it. I think the show is still very much a PG program. It's just that the darkness isn't sugar-coated, and I think the story is better for that. And as I mentioned in my review for season 1, the show's art style continues to be a very inspired choice. I think as a crowd-funded project, the show clearly lacks this, the budget to compete head-to-head with, Pixar or DreamWorks or just any of the other big players in animation. But I think by utilizing a very charming and unique sort of watercolor aesthetic, it does sort of circumvent some of those limitations and I think turns what might have been a major drawback into one of its standout strengths. And as part of the visuals, I think the character design work continues to be awesome as well, very inventive. I think with several fun, new characters that join the cast, such as Lord of the Rings alumni Billy Boyd, aka Pippin, who voices a new kind of villainous character, the Overseer. And if you know me, any Lord of the Rings connection, the better. And I think, in fact, I think the whole voice cast in this show is almost excellent across the board. I think with kind of returnees like Jodie Benson, as some of you may know as the Little Mermaid, and Kevin McNary, delivering very great performances as Nina Wingfeather and Porto Helmer, respectively. And for any of you that are interested, book lovers out there, the season does remain, I think, remarkably faithful to the books, covering kind of most of the material from book 2, North or Be Eaten. And I think as with the books, the story is built on a foundation of theological truth rather than ever feeling like just a vehicle to preach that truth. Even, and maybe I'll get some haters in the comments for this, but even the Chronicles of Narnia, as classic and just thematically rich as those books are, at least to me, sometimes feels as if Lewis is just taking the story in a direction that is required to make a theological point, rather than just allowing the narrative to like unfold organically. And to be clear, there are definitely kind of didactic elements and wholesome themes in the Wingfeather saga as well. It's just that there's no, to me, like immersion breaking moments where it seems like the creators push pause, in the story in order just to like sermonize. I think even some Christian viewers may want like more overt Christian messaging. But for me, I found the story, kind of the story first approach, very refreshing. And as a book reader, I do know that there are some more like, theological moments that are on the story's horizon. And if there's anything that is still, I think, holding this show back, it might be limited resources and accessibility. Because the 7-episode runtime is short, even by like, the current standards of, reduced, shortened seasons. I think a 10-episode run would have better served the narrative and just allowed the story a bit more like breathing room to develop its characters and its world. And kind of similarly, at least as I'm filming this review, the show does remain in like an early access period on the Angel Studios app, meaning that only like, guild members can access it. I know the first season was made like publicly available for free, and I'm assuming that this season, will eventually be released for the public as well. And I don't necessarily have an issue with like the business model. Obviously, these shows aren't cheap to make, but I do think like the more like fractured nature of the release rollout may prevent the show from finding as much like traction or just earning like as widespread recognition and acclaim as it deserves, which is just unfortunate. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, really not a whole lot at all. Language, there's no profanity, there's no language to be concerned about. Neither is there anything in regards to like sexuality. The only other area where there may be something just to be heads up as parents is for violence. Although even this is very like mild and like bloodless action scenes, as several like of these lizard-like creatures, the fangs, are killed either with like arrows and swords. And you animal lovers out there is a scene where an animal does die by falling off a cliff, kind of in a heroic sacrifice, and you don't see the death, but you do sort of see the body afterwards. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface, there is some, I think, very wholesome and edifying redemptive themes in this show. Ones that even like I've been able to have conversations with my own kids about, as they did resonate with the characters in this show. I think one of them is just the theme of taking responsibility. Because if you know from the end of the first season, kind of Janner, Kalmar, and Lily, the three kids and the Igby family, learn that they are in fact the jewels of Anira, who are like royalty from a great kind of fallen kingdom beyond the sea. Sort of like Camelot kingdom in this story. And much of this second season does see those three children just learning to deal with, the sudden lofty expectations that come with that revelation. And primarily Kalmar, who is like the rightful king, and Janner, his older brother, who is, called to be the throne warden and kind of his noble, protector. You definitely see them just struggle with their respective roles. And Kalmar, he is sort of enticed by the luxury and the power that comes, from being a king, but is burdened just by the weight of that responsibility. And he responds by just sort of acting out selfishly and kind of attempting to sidestep those responsibilities. Where Janner, on the other hand, deals with sort of like the humbling task of having to serve his younger brother, who is for the most part very ungrateful for his sacrifices. And I think the show, at least in this season, doesn't necessarily provide just a ton of like, very on the nose teaching moments for those struggles. But what I appreciate is that it does allow those two characters to struggle, to fail, to learn from their own experiences, or at least Janner to sort of continually strive to still do the right thing. And kind of another theme, which may be my favorite thing about the entire show and story as a whole, which is a positive thing that is carried over from the first season, and that is just the importance of family and what it does mean to like love and support and protect one another. Because typically in these sort of like coming of age stories, the younger characters are almost like inevitably separated from their parents or their guardians, either because they are orphans a la Harry Potter, or because they journey into like a different world on their own a la the Chronicles of Narnia. But what makes the Wingfeather saga, I think, different is just how multi-generational the adventure is. I think 3 generations journey together, each with their own like unique challenges, but with a very shared love for each other. And it's just a very like positive portrayal of of that family unit that I just find very refreshing. At the same time, the show is not like unrealistic or just overly idealistic in its understanding of the family. I think the Igby family is a very close-knit, like almost ideal of a loving family, but not all characters in the show are so lucky. And at one point, a new character in the season, Marilee Weaver, who is like the daughter of a villainous outlaw king, she kind of chides Janner for complaining about his situation, given like how lucky he has it with his loving and supportive family, and sort of how difficult her own upbringing has been. And I think kind of just beyond like just biological families, the show also just affirms like the beauty of found family and providing love and protection to those who, maybe haven't been blessed with their own supportive family. And that also comes out in the last couple episodes of this, as really Janner learns that lesson through his experiences in the very like, dank and, dreary Fork Factory. But in the end, at least for me, the Wingfeather Saga continues to deliver almost everything I want from this show. It does build upon, the very promising first season, and just takes the story to a higher level of quality in almost every way. I think if you haven't checked out the Wingfeather Saga yet, you are missing out on just some very quality and wholesome entertainment. And I know, at least for me and for my family, we cannot wait for season 3. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. If you been watching the show, or maybe you read the books, or maybe you're just not sure yet about how you feel about this show, would love to have a conversation with you. So don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. And I encourage you guys too, if you haven't done so, become a Collider, subscribe to the channel. Got lots of movie reviews, and we've got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast and interviews and just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.